Life is full of what-if questions. Questions that make us ponder what the world would be like if some key event happened differently or didn't even happen at all. Today, we'll look at one of the biggest musical what-ifs of all. What if the Beatles never broke up? We'll talk about some of the possibilities as well as interdimensional travel. Coming up next on Track by Track. Hey everybody, my name's Kyle, and this is Track by Track, music reviews, news, and commentary. Thanks for tuning in today, and if this is your first time here, please take a second to click subscribe so that you won't miss future reviews and more.
This was my last gig.
Recently, a movie trailer was released for a summer 2019 film that's bound to catch the attention of a lot of music fans. Yesterday is a musical comedy from filmmaker Danny Boyle, the acclaimed director of Trainspotting, 28 Days Later, and Slumdog Millionaire. The plot centers around a struggling musician who wakes up after an accident to discover that he now lives in an alternate universe where the Beatles never existed.
Oh, I believe in yesterday.
When did you write that?
I didn't write it. Paul McCartney wrote it. The Beatles.
Who?
As he claims the songs as his own, the once unknown musician finds himself skyrocketing into global superstardom. How does it all end? To find out, we'll have to wait until June 28th when Yesterday hits a big screen near you. Now, I have to say, I love the concept behind this film. Even though I am in no way a history buff, I've always enjoyed the concept of alternate history in books and movies and TV. The Amazon TV series, The Man in the High Castle, is a prime example of the genre. The series takes place in an alternate version of America in the 1960s, where our country is ruled by Japan and Germany, because the Axis powers won World War II instead of the Allied powers. It's based on the book of the same name by the legendary science fiction author Philip K. Dick, who made a career of writing mind-bending fiction. While major world events may be attractive subjects for those who wish to rewrite history, I've rarely seen the alternate history concept applied to musical subjects. Of course, in popular music history, there's no act with a more colorful story to reinvent than the Beatles. Yesterday imagines a world where the Fab Four never existed, but the most common form of alternate history fans seem to engage in when it comes to the Beatles is to ponder the question, what if the Beatles never broke up? Now, for a lot of reasons, we really haven't seen much in the way of mainstream explorations of this idea. I mean, I can just imagine how tricky and expensive it would be to get the rights to use the Beatles' music or the individual members' likenesses in a movie on that topic. It sounds like Yesterday's solution is to simply eliminate the Beatles themselves and the actual recordings from the entire equation. The only other movie I can think of that comes close to taking on an alternate history of the Beatles was the 2000 film Two of Us. The plot of that film centers around John Lennon and Paul McCartney getting together casually one day in 1976 and ultimately toying with the idea of getting the Beatles back together. The movie was inspired by an episode of Saturday Night Live during which producer Lorne Michaels went on the air to offer the Beatles $3,000 to reunite for a performance on his show.
If you want to give Ringo less, that's up to you.
Oh, that's brutal, that
I'd rather not.
I love Ringo.
As it turns out, Lennon and McCartney were actually together watching that very episode as it was broadcast live, just blocks away at Lennon's apartment in the Dakota. Both legendary musicians would later reveal in interviews that they were so amused by the Saturday Night Live proposition that they briefly joked about taking Michaels up on his offer that very night, that they momentarily considered showing up at the SNL studios as a gag. Of course, that never did happen, and that Saturday Night Live sketch went on to be merely a funny footnote in the post-breakup legacy of the Fab Four. But it was the very possibility of that reunion that became the inspiration for Two of Us, the movie. While the film doesn't really rewrite Beatles history, it at the very least lets us imagine what might have happened if the most successful songwriting duo of all time had gotten back together, even if only on a whim. It's a clever, albeit minor bit of fantasy that earns at least a few points of legitimacy by being directed by Michael Lindsay Hogg, the filmmaker behind the Beatles' infamous Let It Be movie. Two of Us isn't available on streaming services right now, but it is available on DVD. If you're interested in checking it out, you can find a link to that in the description below. As for full-blown theories of what might have happened if the Beatles never broke up, a simple Google search will reveal that the internet is absolutely full of them. Pretty much all of it is little more than pipe dreams and fan fiction, of course, but there's at least one alternate history scenario out there that impressed me quite a bit. In October 2013, Paste magazine published a feature by staff writer Jeffrey Himes entitled, "What If the Beatles Hadn't Broke Up?" Taking a page from fan fiction, Himes' story incorporates imagined dialogues and scenarios involving each member of the Fab Four, as well as many of their friends and contemporaries. While the author leans heavily on the common Beatles what-if trope of imagining many of their solo hits instead emerging as Beatles songs, he backs up his ideas with impressive cultural and historical context. If you're a Beatles fan, it's well worth reading the entire feature, and I'll link to it down in the description. But in a nutshell, the author selects his point of historical diversion as Paul McCartney quitting the band following the release of Let It Be, and from there, he imagines Ringo as taking a leading role in keeping the remaining members together. The legendary drummer proposes to Lennon and Harrison that they all continue on together in more of a part-time fashion, giving them each time to pursue eclectic solo interests, while maintaining the Beatles as an outlet for their more traditional rock and roll impulses. Naturally, the band must bring in a new bass player, and in fact, they go through two noteworthy musicians in the process. Now, I don't want to give away who they are, nor will I reveal the interesting parallel musical path that McCartney takes as he reacts to his former bandmates soldiering on without him. Again, it's well worth reading on your own. Now, as I said, there's a ton of Beatles fan fiction floating around out there, so the fact that this one is actually published in a respectable music magazine is pretty impressive. But perhaps the most notorious bit of Beatles alternative history is the one that actually proposes itself to, in fact, be real. Everyday Chemistry is one of several albums recorded by the Beatles after Let It Be, because in a parallel dimension, the Beatles never broke up. That's the story proposed by a man writing under the name James Richards, who claims that in 2009 he was transported to one of many parallel worlds by a mysterious dimensional traveler. During this encounter, Richards learns that in this alternate reality, all four members of the Beatles are still alive and well, still recording albums, and even touring. Curiously enough, this is also a world where the compact disc never came to be, and music is still consumed on tape cassette. That's an important part of the story, actually. You see, when Richards is shown various new Beatles albums on cassette at the home of his mysterious host, he asks if he can take them back with him. And although the cross-dimensional traveler insists that it's forbidden to transport such artifacts between worlds, Richard still sneaks back to our world with one tape stashed away in his pocket as proof of his otherwise unbelievable experience. And the best part is, you can listen to it. Everyday Chemistry is actually available to download on Richard's website, thebeatlesneverbroakeup.com. You can also find it right here on YouTube. Now, I don't want to suggest that Richards is lying about any of this. It's obviously a pretty outlandish story that he tells, and he completely owns up to that. But it's not as if there's space aliens involved in this tale or anything like John Lennon faking his own death. However, if you listen to Everyday Chemistry, what you'll hear is something that most people would best describe as a mashup album. It's nearly an hour of songs that seem to be constructed by putting together various solo recordings spanning much of the former Fab Four's post-Beatles careers. Make no mistake, it's all very well done and clearly crafted with no small amount of love and passion, but in the end, I doubt that Everyday Chemistry is going to convert you into a tinfoil hat-wearing Beatles conspiracy theorist. But hey, rock and roll has always been an outlandish endeavor. I can easily imagine we could someday see alternate history interpretations of the Rolling Stones, or perhaps even Madonna, whose long and storied careers are ripe for reinvention. In 2007, the movie I'm Not There offered an inventive biographical interpretation of the legendary Bob Dylan, in which the singer was portrayed by actors of varying ages, genders, and ethnicities. Even the upcoming film Rocket Man looks to be injecting a certain amount of fantasy into the Elton John story. An even bolder idea that I'd love to see embraced by a musical act of significant stature would be for the act itself to manufacture their own alternative history. Imagine, for example, if U2 created the alternative history of U2, complete with fictionalized stories about their rise to fame. Even better, what if they recorded new music to highlight every era of their faux career? the creative output from such an exercise could actually be extraordinary. Meanwhile, I'll look forward to experiencing the what-if world of Yesterday when the film comes out this summer. To me, it looks like the perfect way to explore the question of what if the Beatles never existed. I like the level of whimsy that I'm seeing in the trailer. There's a playfulness that's evident that I think will serve the storytelling well. As music fans, we can only imagine what it would be like to hear those amazing songs for the very first time. Songs that are now part of the musical fabric of our lives. But what about you? How would you answer those questions? What if the Beatles never happened? Or the less depressing question, what if the Beatles never broke up? I'd love to hear your thoughts, or even conspiracies, down in the comments section below. Once again, my name's Kyle, and this has been Track by Track. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Plus, check out some of the other videos below that I think you might also enjoy. And of course, be sure to click subscribe, because true music fans always want new releases the day they come out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.